There's no way that you can escape the fact that one of the central policy problems of this current decade for South Africa is around electricity. It goes all the way back to a famous government white paper in 1998 that prophesied that without proper investment in our energy infrastructure and in Eskom, there would be load shedding by the end of 2007. So it proved it was eerily accurate. Since then, load shedding has become a feature of our daily lives. If you have a child now in the first year of higher education, they've lived with load shedding every year since they went into grade 1. That's the scale of the problem. Perhaps this week was worse than it's ever been. The intense load shedding over the last 3 weeks, and then the President's announcement on Monday night. Well, let's get more on the announcement on energy plans, why it's so difficult, but also, and this may turn out to be important over the next 2 days, are the President's plans as they were announced on Monday night markedly different from the ANC's official policy. Lungile Mashele is an expert on energy and economics. She joins us now. Lungile, good afternoon. Thanks for making the trip. How was the accreditation queue?
Very, very easy. I was very impressed, actually.
So was I. I was there for 2 minutes yesterday.
Precisely.
I had a whole book to read and everything. All right, let's talk about electricity. And let's first just talk about the President's plans. They're quite far-reaching. Everyone's been looking at them. I mean, you can't sort of put it into a 30-second soundbite. Let me put it to you like this. Is what the President announced on Monday night progress?
That's a difficult one to answer, and the answer is basically no. It's not progress. What he announced is something that we've known since 1998 already, but I think what is even more scary is the fact that it's been billed as a plan, when ultimately it's just a series of concepts as well as ideas. If you were to ask now, how are any of those plans actionable, nobody actually knows. How are we going to install this 5,200 megawatts of round 6? We haven't even closed the risk mitigation IPPs. We haven't even closed bid window 5, but we're already doubling up on bid window 6. We are talking about solar home systems for residential customers selling back to Eskom. How? What's the feed-in tariff? Is there a mechanism to actually sell back to Eskom and the distribution system? So we haven't even touched the ground on how actionable are these plans, when will they be done by, which is very, very important. And I think this is why, even with the 2018 plans, we have not been able to hold the President to account, because he simply said we're going to stop load shedding, but there was never an actionable plan of how it was going to happen.
So is it about just the detail? Or is it worse than that?
It's a bit worse than that. Detail is one thing, and I think maybe through that presidential committee that they've got set up in the next 2-3 months, we'll have more detail. But the issue is around government seems to be saying one thing. His party, however, seems to be saying a very different thing. And one has to ask themselves, what's the distinction between what the President says and what the party says? Who is in the President's ear? Who is advising him? The announcements that were made, we are told, came from business, came from private sector, came from Eskom, energy experts, which is awesome. But there are questions there that people are now asking to say, okay, so you're looking at shutting down and some of our coal-fired plants and decommissioning them, but we're seeing trucks every single day moving from Mpumalanga to the ports. Either it's Mpumalanga or it's Richards Bay, but the coal is leaving in higher and higher volumes. And the coal is going to Europe, it's going to Southeast Asia. But you're telling us that we need to decommission, and we're sitting in stage 6 in the dark.
There's an awful amount to it. And I mean, I know you've been going through the ANC's policy documents on this. Are they very different from what the President said? And I must say, in my understanding of ANC policy documents, they often aren't really what's happening. So I'm not entirely surprised. But how different are they from what the President's announced?
So the policy document basically says that there has been a government failure. They also allude to the fact that there has been a failure at Eskom and there are trust issues there. Then they simply talk about the various initiatives such as just energy transition, and they're looking at localization, industrialization. But the very important thing about the ANC documents, they do highlight that since Russia-Ukraine, there have been issues around fossil fuel. And it seems that there seems to be a global trend heading back towards coal, perhaps towards gas, and even nuclear, in some instances. And the policy document is saying, let's discuss these things at the policy space, because it's so important. Government, on the other hand, is basically saying we are looking at nuclear, well, not nuclear, sorry. We are looking at renewables and we're looking at battery. And we've heard this coming from the NPC, from the PCC as well, and that is within the presidency. So one has to ask themselves, where do they get this information from? Because DMRE is saying something completely different. And DMRE is saying we need a mix of everything. It's renewables, it's coal, it's gas, it's nuclear. So you've got these three sort of centers of power, all belonging to one organization, ultimately.
So I mean, before we even start the debate around which is better, and I know once you and I start, we'll never stop, just the fact that there are so many different policies is surely a problem. That you need, for something this big in society, the biggest energy transition we've ever gone through since the creation of not quite since the creation of electricity, but since electricity was available on a mass basis, you need everyone to be on the same page. They're clearly not, from what you say.
Absolutely not. And I think what scares me more than anything is that you have these sort of centers of command and centers of control, and everybody wants their own thing. I'm not even surprised that 2 weeks ago we're told of ISCOM 2.0, because at some point people feel like they're not in control of certain things, and they want them back in the fold, and they want to be able to dictate what happens at those entities, which is rather unfortunate. I mean, I would assume that ANC members do sit in one room and do chat, and even government, whether it's DMRE or DFFE or DPE, that they have these conversations amongst themselves. So for this to spill out on public stages, that is very scary.
Lungile Mashele is with us through the afternoon. You are here through the afternoon,
Yes,
right? The energy expert.